All right. So last week we got through most of lesson 6, which is Intro to Programming, and we left off on exercise number 6, which has to do with random numbers. And then I told you to do number 7 on your own, which was to answer the check for understanding question. So we will kind of check in on some of your answers and then come up with a good class answer as well. So let's go ahead and get started on puzzle number 6, which has to do with random numbers. What we want to do is first I want to reset mine because I altered my stuff last period. So I'm going to start this over. And what we want to do is we basically want to run the program and try to see how it works. And for this, I do need to share my audio. So let me share my audio because this program does use audio in the event handlers. So I want to make sure that we know what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to run this program at regular speed. So that's all the way to the rabbit here. And as we're running this, we want to kind of think about how the random number function is working. And we want to also observe that every time it runs, there's a possibility that we get a different random number. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on run. Now, right now, it's just running the code that's outside of the event handlers, the sequential part, right? The part that does not depend on user input. So right now you should be hearing a sound because this play sound is outside of an event handler. And we are hearing the Forest Woodland Loop MP3, and it is set to loop equals true, so that means it's going to keep playing it while the app is running. Now we do have 2 event handlers. So we see that there's an event handler for mousing over the hawk. So this stuff is going to run if we mouse over the hawk. And then we have another event handler for mousing over the sparrow. So we got two possible events that the user can do. So one is mousing over the hawk. Okay, so when I mouse over the hawk, we get a sound that plays called vibrant wrong action hit. So if you look at the comments, you can kind of see what that means in English. So when the user puts their mouse over the hawk, both birds are going to move, and then we're going to hear a sad sound, and then we're going to see some sad text. So let's look at what happens again. Okay, so you hear that noise, that kind of sounds like something bad happens. We saw both birds move. Each time I mouse over, the birds move into a different random position. We also see the text appear here that says, avoid the hawk. We'll talk about the random number in just a bit, but let's take a look at the other event. The other event is if I mouse over the sparrow. If I read the comments, it says that when the user puts their mouse over the sparrow, we're going to move both birds. But this time we're going to play a happy sound and put happy text on the bottom of the screen. So now I'm going to mouse over the smaller bird, which is the sparrow. And so we hear kind of a nice noise, like something good happened. And it says at the bottom here, you saved another sparrow. Notice that both birds move when I mouse over the sparrow as well. Okay, and again, it's using a random number function, so each time I mouse over, they go to a different random location. So let's take a look at what the random number function is doing now. So I can see that I'm again looking at the first event handler, which handles when the user mouses over the hawk. Okay, let me reset this real quick. So when I mouse over the hawk, all of this code is going to run. So lines 7 through 12. We already talked about the sound that plays, but what I'm really interested in is lines 8 through 11, which sets the property of the x and y coordinates of both the hawk and the sparrow. So when I'm talking about XY coordinates, I'm talking about just like in math class when you're graphing something. Now the X and Y, well, I guess the origin is a little bit different than what you're used to. So the origin is going to be right here because we're only looking at one quadrant. So this right here is going to be your 0, 0. So x is 0 and y is 0 right here. That looks like a little face. And then as you go in this direction, your x is going to increase. Okay, and then as you go down, your y is going to increase. So let's draw the y. Okay, so this is our x-axis and this is our y-axis. Now we need to find out, let's see, how far can we go in the x direction? So in the x direction, it looks like we can go from 0 all the way to about 320. Okay, so I'm going to put 320 right there. And then in the y direction, we can go from 0 all the way to, it's going to be about 450. So we can put 450 there. Okay, so that's the limits of our screen there. So we've got a screen that's 320 pixels wide and 450 pixels tall. Now, if we look at the random numbers that are being generated, it looks like the Hawk's X position is going to change from anything between 0 and 100. So that's only going to be like in this area right here. So let's find out exactly where that is. 100 is going to be like right here. So I'll mark that. I'm going to mark that with a different color. Format. Okay, so I think I said about right here is going to be 100. Okay, so that means that the Hawk can be anywhere in between 0 and 100 in the X direction. And then for the Y direction, it looks like, so I'm looking at line 9, the Hawk is going to wind up in some Y coordinate that's between 0 and 200. Okay, so 0 and 200. So we can see where that is also. So up here is 0. If I hover over here, 200 is going to be about here. So almost where that, where this guy's tail is. So 200 is about here. So that means that the Hawk can only be in between, in this area right here. Right? When I run this. He starts out here, that's just a starting position, but every time I hover over either of the birds, he's going to be in this area only, somewhere in this area. It looks like the random number ranges for sparrows X and sparrows Y is the same, so the sparrow is only going to wind up in this area as well. So somewhere over here. If we look at the other event handler, the random numbers, again, have the same ranges. So it doesn't matter which bird I hover over, they're always going to wind up somewhere in this area because of the random number range that we're providing the functions. So let's illustrate this by running the program. Okay, and so you always see that they kind of stay in there. Now you might see that the Hawk is a little bit outside. That's probably because the edge of his wing is probably where what is actually being considered the position. So the image is wider, is a little bit wider. The Hawk's image is a bit wider, so it looks like, you know, the edge of his wing is always going to be within that pink area that we marked off there. Okay, so what if, oh, well, let's first look at this question. Why do the birds move even if they're not clicked, right? We're used to the click action happening, right? But in this case, I'm just mousing over, right? I'm not clicking. And that's because we're seeing an example of a different event. So we previously were using the click event. In this program, we're using just the mouse over. And so we don't actually have to click on the elements in order for the event handler to trigger. Okay. Let's see, what else? Now we actually want to modify our code so that our two birds aren't limited to just this area. We want them to potentially go anywhere across the screen. So we want to make sure that they can go over here or down here or over here, anywhere, the middle. So what we need to do to fix that is we need to change these random number ranges. So my question to you is, if we want the hawk to be able to go anywhere in the X direction on this screen, what should our range be? Right now it's 0 to 100. What should it actually be if we want the hawk to be anywhere in the X direction here? 320, right? Because we kind of put here that the limit here is 320. So we're going to go ahead and change line 8 so that the maximum possible number we can get is 320. And we also want to do that for the sparrow as well. So we're going to find the line that controls the sparrow's X direction. So that's line 10. And we're going to change the maximum value also to 320. Now, what do I want to change my Y limit to? So right now it's 0 to 200, which means it can only go down this far. Right, Charles. So we want to make sure that we put the maximum of the screen, which we saw was 450. So we're going to go ahead and change now line 9 so that it'll be a random number between 0 and not 200, but 450. And we'll do that again both for the hawk and for the sparrow as well. So line 11, I will also change to 450. Okay, so that's just this first event. This is the event handler that handles when a user mouses over the hawk. We also want to make sure that this happens when we mouse over the sparrow. So let's scroll down and find the second event handler. So this is the one that handles when we mouse over the sparrow. And we're going to put the same exact random number range. So again, for the X direction, that was 320. So I'll do that on line 19 for the hawk's X position. And then for line 21 for the sparrow's X position, I'll also put the maximum of 320. And then for our Y position, line 20, for the hawk's Y position, I'm going to put the maximum is 450. And then finally for the sparrow's maximum Y position, I'm going to put 450 as well. Okay, so now when I run this, they should no longer be limited to this area, but they should be able to appear anywhere on this screen. So now I'm going to run it. All right, so now we see them going everywhere, right? Even all the way to the bottom here. So now we have modified this program so that now both of the elements, the bird elements, our characters on the screen, are able to move anywhere on the phone screen. All right, so now what I want to do is, let me go ahead and clear the drawings. Now what I want to ask you to do is, let's experiment with other event types besides mouse over, which we saw today, and the click type event, which we saw last time. So if we are in the block mode, we can actually click the arrow in our event handler. So this is the second arrow here. That's going to be the action or the event. And we can see a whole list of potential events. So let's try something other than click or mouse over. What if I do mouse move? Let's go ahead and try that for both the hawk and the sparrow. So mouse move. Okay, so that pretty much works like mouse over in this case. So anytime I move the mouse and I go over the hawk or the sparrow, those events are going to be triggered. What if I use some other input device like a key? So what if I put key press? Let's do that for both the sparrow event and the hawk event. So for key press, I'm gonna have to press a key on the keyboard, right? So I'm pressing keys and nothing's happening. So it doesn't appear that this event actually works for this game. And we'll kind of see why that doesn't work. We'll take a look at how we can actually use the key events. But for now, for controlling characters on the screen with event handlers, we kind of want to, limit it to the mouse for now. And then in the future, we'll look at how we can use key presses to actually modify stuff as well. All right, so let me reset that. And you can kind of experiment with this more on your own, but that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today with this last exercise here. For the last few minutes of class now, we're going to talk about that last check for understanding question that I told you to work on. So we're going to go ahead and click finish on this one and make sure that you have made those modifications for the random number, and make sure you change it back to mouse over so that it actually works. And if you didn't get a chance to make those modifications, it'll be in the video that will be of the video that's posted after class, which is the Zoom recording. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish. And let's go ahead and work on our last thing for today, which is the check for understanding question. So at this time, let's take a minute and you can open up yours. I told you to do this for homework. And go ahead and just like copy and paste what your answer was. You can either send it to the public chat, or if you don't want other people to see your answers, you can direct message me. So let's take a minute and do that, and then we'll talk about the answers and kind of make a really good class answer. All right, so I've got a few different answers. If you're still working on getting yours in, you can send them in, but I'll go ahead and read through them and then we'll discuss. So Robert said procedure-driven programs, which is basically another name for sequential programs. They work sequentially from the beginning to the end. You start the program with initial parameters and the program does its thing and spits out a result. So result here would be like stuff happening on the screen or whatever. That's really good. And then Dan Lin says the difference between a sequential program is that it does not require a specific function or action to be activated, and it's already implemented into the program. While an event-driven program requires a function or action to be triggered so the command can work and change the UI, for example. And then we've got some anonymous ones like the difference between a sequential program and an event-driven program would be that the code is executed line by line. So I'm guessing sequential program would be executed line by line in order in a sequence. Whereas code in an event-driven program is only executed when an event occurs. Sequential programs operate in the same way each time it is run, but event-driven programs do not operate consistently since it is reliant on the interaction of the user. Yeah, I like that. I like that you pointed out that sequential programs are pretty much going to do their thing in the same way, but event-driven programs, the way that they execute is really going to depend on user interaction or input. All right, let's read a few more of these. They're all really good answers. A sequential program is when a code is executed line by line or is in order from start to finish. And event-driven is when an event needs to be triggered or interacted with. Exactly. So a lot of these kind of have the same stuff, which is really good because it's correct. These are really good explanations. Okay, so since we're already over by a couple minutes, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste what we kind of came up with in the previous period. And I like all of your answers, but here's kind of what we came up with. Sequential programs contain code that runs in order every single time it is run, right? A lot of you kind of pointed that out. It's always going to run in order. Nothing's ever going to change. But event-driven programs may, here's a point I wanted to make. Event-driven programs might actually contain some sequential commands outside of an event handler. But they also contain event handlers, which in our programming language is called onEvent. And those event handlers contain code that only executes if a certain event is triggered. For example, the user clicks on a button or hovers over an element. So, you know what, I'm going to actually add to that because I think one of you said something that was really cool and very accurate, is that event-driven programs may not operate the same way upon each execution. Since it depends on, I'm just going to put input, whether it be from the user or something else. It depends on input and events. So I'm just going to add on to that since you all kind of added some additional info that I thought was really important. So this will, if you don't have time to kind of like write this in your notes or whatever, it's going to be in the video. And I'm also going to go ahead and add these definitions to our Quizlet as well, which I made available for you to study for our next test, which will be probably in a few weeks here. But I'm going to stop the recording.